Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Missing Frames. This is the podcast where we watch all the movies we should have seen by this point in our lives. I'm your host, Shawn Eastridge. We're hanging out on the Nerd Party Network, a collection of podcasts dedicated to all things entertainment. Check us out at thenerdparty.com and find us on Instagram at The Nerd Party. You can find us on Twitter at Join Nerd Party and on Facebook, just The Nerd Party. And just in time for the holidays, we have Ambre Trujillo back again. Welcome, Amber. Glad you could be here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You're always so nice.
Did I pronounce your last name more correctly this time than I did in our last episode?
I don't remember you mispronouncing my name last time.
I just remember feeling a lot of, not pressure from you, but I was like, I'm going to get this right because I'd psyched myself up about it. And now I felt like I just went right into it without thinking about it. And I just wanted to see. Okay, good. So we're all set. That episode was Contact, by the way, the film Contact. I don't remember which number episode it was. Sorry, everybody. Oh, do you remember, Amber?
I don't remember. We're awful people.
Breaking my heart. Yeah, both of us are breaking my heart. But you know what? That's all in the past. We're moving forward into the future. It's a brand new episode. This is episode 127 of Missing Frames. It's 2022. And we are just at the tail end of what is the 40th anniversary of one of the greatest films of all time. And that film is Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And I know I'm kind of saying that maybe a little like tongue in cheek, but I mean it sincerely. I think it's one of the best movies ever. It's certainly the best Star Trek film, in my opinion, and widely considered the best Star Trek film. And Amber, you have never seen Star Trek II, although you are a Star Trek fan. So tell me a little bit about your Star Trek love, how you got into it, and what has led you to this point of not seeing the seminal Star Trek film.
Yeah, so Star Trek, I am definitely not, I have not earned the honor of being called a Trekkie because I do not have nearly enough knowledge of Star Trek as most people do, not even like a little bit. Why? Because I've only watched the original Star Trek.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So really like my journey with that was I started out watching Outer Limits and The Twilight Zone. And that's what kind of like piqued my interest on like the older sci-fis. And then I kind of watched Star Trek when it was just coming out on TV. And then a friend of mine...
So back in the 60s.
Back in the 60s. Yeah, I'm a time traveler. Did you not know that, Shawn?
Well, I figured you had to be. I had a feeling about you, Amber.
If we could start that conspiracy theory, that would be great. If I had any kind of rumors about me, the fact that I'd be a time traveler, I'd be okay with that. I would be okay with people. Yeah, this is where it starts. You know what? You and I have been trying to start some kind of conspiracy theory for a minute now. So I think this is it. This is the one. This is the one that's going to catch on. This is the one that people are going to gravitate towards.
I think this is going to go far.
I think so too.
So you were into Star Trek.
Yes.
You got into it, but you've only seen the original series. You were watching it like reruns on TV.
Yeah. So a friend of mine told me that I had to watch every single Star Trek episode, and I had to start from the beginning, and I had to watch every single episode, and that's pretty daunting. Just a little bit. And so I started just with the original series, and then I wasn't able to go on, but it's definitely especially with where I'm working now, it's necessary. Like I don't have a choice at that point. So I'm excited. I'm excited to get into it because it really is, I think, even though the small amount of knowledge that I have with Star Trek, I know enough that it has totally revolutionized television as far as bringing science fiction to tackle really difficult conversations. The fact that they changed the game by their diversity factor was also huge. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I definitely want to get a lot more into it.
Yeah. And it makes sense that you would, because for those of you who don't know, Amber actually works in outer space. She's beamed in for this episode, which is again, just incredible. Well, using time travel technology, you've beamed into this podcast sphere to be a part of this episode. In all reality, Amber is a massive outer space fan, all things NASA and space travel and other planets. And I mean, you're awesome. Like, you know more about this stuff than anybody I know, maybe aside from the actual crew of the Enterprise. So, I mean, that's certainly something to be proud of.
Well, thank you. I am overtly obsessed with outer space and everything having to do with space, and I'm lucky enough to be able to have a career in the industry so I can become more obsessed and feed my obsession.
So Star Trek is something that you have dabbled with a little bit, familiar enough to know you enjoy it, but not necessarily something you've delved into completely.
Correct. Yeah. I don't know what it's called. I know it's not. Is it a different series? Like having to go. Like how do you name those different? Like so, there's the one from the '60s, and then there's the one in the '80s, right?
Yeah, you're right. So it's the original series is, you know, the OG.
Yeah.
That's what everyone calls it now. TOS, if you're into abbreviations. Then there was the Next Generation in the late 80s, early 90s, and that was Captain Picard and Data and all of them. And then Deep Space Nine came after that, Voyager came after that, and then Enterprise. And then I think Enterprise got canceled. Then they did the reboot, the J.J. Abrams movie, which I love. I'm just going to put that out there to everybody because I know there are some haters who are like, oh, it's too exciting. And I'm like,
what?
And that's a bad thing? Yeah, there are people who don't like it because it's not talky enough and it's too... J.J. Abrams, who was not a Star Trek fan, brought his Star Wars love to the franchise. And I think some people resent it a little bit. That's neither here nor there. The point is, there are many, many series of Star Trek. It is very daunting to get into this franchise. I can't blame you. And as much as I love the original series, I would not say it's the best this franchise has to offer. My personal favorite, as people may know already, is Next Generation, but I'm a big fan of Deep Space Nine as well. I just watched Deep Space Nine.
I have to watch Deep Space Nine, but I will say I have seen a lot of the episodes of The Next Generation. I've just seen the original series more because one of my science communicator, like one of the people that I look up to as far as like communication goes, is LeVar Burton, and he played LaForge, right?
Yeah.
So I loved his character, just the way that I mean, I love to get into the science aspects of anything sci-fi. We talked about this on the Contact episode. I'm really like, you know, it gets me excited when they bring in real scientific terms and stuff. So I think I remember that LaForge had some kind of like he would see in different spectrums, like different wavelengths of light, right? Was that his
something
thing?
like that?
Yeah, which was
you
really
know more about
cool.
this than I do. I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds right.
That's the stuff that gets me excited when I'm watching something. I'm like, oh my gosh, they used it correctly.
Amber is responsible for the invention of the visor that gives Geordi LaForge his sight, I think is how I understand it.
Yeah, we could start that one too.
You invented it, and then you came back in time to grace us with the knowledge of that really landmark revolutionary invention.
Yeah, it's a look. I saw it and I was like, this is the vibe. They're gonna love it. They're gonna love it. And so nailed it.
This is the vibe, sir.
Vibes. Oh, clever.
No,
clever.
No, don't even humor me. Don't, please.
Oh, okay, then I won't.
Okay, thank you. But yeah, so you know a little bit about it.
Yeah.
This makes more sense now that you haven't seen Star Trek 2, because I was kind of amazed because you were like, yeah, original series, but not really any of the movies. So have you not seen any of the movies? Or
None of the movies.
Wow. Okay, this is going to be great. So I'm going to give you the quick recap because I know at least a few people have probably heard me say this before, but let me tell you how I got into Star Trek. So I kind of grew up watching Next Generation a little bit because that was the one that was on when I was younger. And I always enjoyed it. I was really, and still to this day, am a bigger movie person than TV person. So as I got older, I kind of not leaned away from the TV show. Like I would catch the odd episode of Star Trek, whether it was the original series or Next Generation here and there. But I'm a movie person. So I was like, well, let me go and watch the movies. That's my thing. I don't have time to sit down and watch a television show. No, I can't. So I was very familiar with the films. I saw this movie, Wrath of Khan, very, very early on. It wasn't until more recently, like in the past few years, that I went back and started watching the TV show. Specifically, I went back and watched the original series and was like, oh, this is really good. And then I watched Next Generation and I was like, oh my God, this is actually like incredible. Like I really took this for granted. I kind of had written it off as like, yeah, I'm sure you nerds like it, as if I'm not a huge nerd. I mean,
you're one of us.
I'm in the Nerd Party Network. I would have to qualify for this position. But no, like in all reality, I was kind of like, I'm sure Star Trek is nice if you're like into that kind of stuff. But sitting down and actually watching it all the way through and realizing like this is actually really smart and really like not just intellectual, which I'd kind of pegged Star Trek as being like Star Wars is fun and exciting and Star Trek is slow and methodical. But it's actually, not only is Star Trek very fun when it needs to be, but it's much more thoughtful and it's more about ideas than Star Wars is. And this is coming from someone who loves Star Wars, but Star Wars is more about the fun and the excitement and it has a lot of heart, but Star Trek like makes you think like in a way
it's
that
another level.
That's exactly it. And I kind of was not expecting that, or maybe I knew, but I didn't realize how, as I've gotten older and have just gotten more into like, philosophy and psychology and Star Trek really goes into that stuff. It really, really started to like catch my interest. And so I went through Next Generation. I went through Deep Space Nine in the past year and really loved that. But yeah, I totally became a Star Trek fanboy in a way I had always kind of been growing up, but really in the past few years, I've kind of become really, really pushing people to watch it and being like, no, you don't understand. This is a really, really great show.
I feel like you have to come to a point in your life where you will appreciate it. Because I do remember seeing it on like TV growing up, and you kind of just like, you go through it, like you change the channel.
There are makeup, costumes. There are things that are very dated and sometimes are like, okay, this looks very cheap and goofy.
Exactly, but you have to come to a point in your life where you really appreciate those deep ideas, because it really does. It not only ties in really beautifully a lot of the science elements, but as you said, the philosophical, like things that we're going through just like as human beings, all of these human condition questions. So it nails it, and the writers are just absolutely phenomenal.
That's the thing. Until I started watching it, I always kind of assumed it was less about the heart than it was about the ideas, but it's the marriage of both, really. And it really is. I would encourage anybody who's kind of like been on the fence about it, but it really is like not just on an intellectual level, but just on like an emotional level. It's a celebration of like the what people are capable of when they're willing to put aside differences and work together and for the better of everyone. And it's a really beautiful idea. And I think especially in this day and age where everyone is very divided and everything is kind of a cause to sling mud at somebody else, to watch the show in this day and age where people are fighting to understand other people and differences. I'm like, this is something I can get on board with. This is really great and really necessary. Which brings us to the movies. So let me give you a little history about how the movies came about. Okay. Originally, so Star Trek, the original series, did you know it was canceled?
Yes, I did.
So it was canceled in its third season. And what happened was, in syndication, suddenly the ratings started to rise. And before long, Star Trek became Star Trek. Like, people were watching it, they were obsessed with it because it caught on with the college crowd, like kids who could go home or go back to their dorm room between classes and just like during lunch, like, oh, Star Trek reruns on at 12 o'clock, I'll watch that. So it became very popular via word of mouth and reruns. So that was part one of a conversation where all of a sudden Gene Roddenberry, the show's creator, was like, maybe we can redo this and start a new show. And then Star Wars came out in 1977 and became the biggest thing ever. And Paramount, the studio, I don't know exactly how they obtained the rights for the film, but they saw that happen and they were like, we need to do that. We need to make hundreds of millions of dollars and make a space thing. What do we have? And somebody in the boardroom was like, I think we own the rights to Star Trek. So they decided to make a movie. So Star Wars is really kind of directly responsible for launching Star Trek's film franchise, but also Star Trek's second life. But it got off to a rough start. And this is I did Star Trek the motion picture with some wonderful friends of mine, TC and Leah. I think it was during the 40th anniversary of that film. We're now celebrating the 40th anniversary of Wrath of Khan, but you can go check that out. We talk a little bit about it, but Star Trek the motion picture, the first film, was going to be a big budget answer to Star Wars, but it was going to be more intellectual. It was going to follow the path of Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey and be the opposite of Star Wars. But what happened was, because there were so many script problems and the budget was just kind of ballooning out of control, this film was released in 1979 and was kind of a dud. Like, it brought back the cast and fans were really excited, but the movie itself, and again, there are people out there who are Star Trek fans who love the motion picture. I get it. I do enjoy it despite what I'm about to say, but the reality is Star Trek the motion picture is a very cold and dull movie. How do I say it? My friend and I would have, like in high school, we would have sleepovers, and it would get to be about 5, 6 in the morning where we're like, oh my God, we need to go to sleep, but we're like totally wired. What do we do? Oh, put on Star Trek the motion picture. And I'm not joking, within the first 15 minutes, we would be completely passed out.
Oh my God.
It gained a reputation for being called Star Trek the motionless picture.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Wow.
All that said, I highly recommend watching it at some point. It's just not the movie, definitely not the first thing I would show a Star Trek skeptic. So it does moderately well at the box office. It's a kind of a bomb with critics. Fans are kind of cold to it too. They're like, it lacks the charm and the fun of the TV series, which frankly, I think the original series is really, really good, but it has some really campy, goofy episodes as well. But when it works, it's fantastic.
I watched it primarily for the Velcro that the guns were stuck to, just so I can hear it go. And then that's the only reason why I watched it.
This is cutting edge technology, the 23rd, 24th century, whatever the hell century it is. This is, everything is Velcro, Amber. You know this. You came from that century to give us the technology.
I gave Star Trek Velcro.
You did. Thank you. Yes. God bless you for that.
You're
so Star Trek 2, there are conversations about, all right, we know this franchise is lucrative. We know there's money to be made, but we also know we can't make another giant, expensive, big budget bomb of a movie. So what happens is Paramount kind of pushes Gene Roddenberry to the side. Gene Roddenberry had a lot of control on the first movie, and when it made it all this intellectual gobbledygook that kind of messed the movie up. And a producer, I guess, who worked for Paramount, Harv Bennett, was put in charge of Star Trek. They were basically like, can you make it cheaper and better? And he was like, yeah, sure. He worked in TV. He knew exactly about how to make a smaller budget go a long way, if that makes sense. So Harv Bennett, who didn't know anything about Star Trek, sat down, watched all of the episodes, and was like, okay, I think I get it. And then they hired a director who had also never heard of Star Trek, or had heard of it but didn't know much about Star Trek. They called him, his name is Nicholas Meyer, and they called him on the phone to pitch him the idea. And he goes, Star Trek, is that the one with the pointy-eared guy? And they were like, yes, that's it. So you have these two Star Trek noobs come into the picture and are given the keys to the kingdom of the Star Trek cinematic enterprise. Oh, I didn't even
Oh,
mean to do that. I'm going to
wow.
pretend I did. I could cut this whole thing out and make myself seem brilliant, but I'm not going to. I want everyone to know just how silly I am. But basically, these guys, and they weren't condescending. They looked at it and they, as filmmakers and storytellers, they said, okay, now that we've sat down and we've watched every episode of the show, the original series, here is what we think works about Star Trek and why people love it. And they boiled it down to the essentials and they made it for cheaper. So I'm just going to warn you, some of the stuff in this movie does look cheap. It was 1982,
Wonderful.
but even by 1982 standards, some of the stuff is dated. But what they got right was the spirit of Star Trek. And we're going to talk about a lot of this in part 2 because again, I don't want to spoil it. And I've been at least yammering on for God knows how long. I think we've been here for hours just talking about the pre-show of the movie. But what you need to know is it was the perfect combination of people with fresh perspective coming into this franchise and having just enough reverence for it without being kind of like, we have to adhere to these very strict rules. They brought some freshness to it. And as a result, the film was much better received. It revived the franchise and basically saved it from oblivion and has gone down to this day as the best Star Trek movie. And also, frankly, one of the best science fiction movies ever. And
I'm so excited.
I'm very excited for you to see it because I really think like, if you see nothing else of Star Trek, and I know there's a lot out there and there's a lot of great stuff, but if you were to say to me, Shawn, just give me something that I can watch that's 2 hours that I can just get a feel for what Star Trek is, this is it. Like, this is what I would tell you to watch. It's The Wrath of Khan. And so I'm very excited to see what you think about it. Now,
I'm super excited now, like even more so.
Now, I want you to, without knowing much about this movie,
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you that it is inspired by an episode of the series where they meet Khan for the first time. This is a semi-sequel to that episode. It's called Space Seed. You can watch that before you watch this movie if you want. I think it's on Paramount Plus or streaming somewhere.
Ooh.
You don't have to, though. This movie functions without you needing to know the background. But I want you, just knowing these little bits,
to.
Go for it. I think that would be awesome, and come back and we can talk about both the episode and the movie. But I want you to try to guess what Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is about with your knowledge of Star Trek, as limited as it may be, and knowing what the title is. Tell me, just guesstimate. No judgments here. What do you think Star Trek II is about?
Ooh, that's such an interesting question. Okay, so just deriving from what the title is, I'm assuming Khan is upset over over something in which that it would be titled The Wrath. So I've heard Khan referenced before, just from like Star Trekkies, like I've heard the name be dropped.
Okay.
I'm assuming the Enterprise did something to a planet to make them really mad. And I'm assuming Khan is either the name of a species or it's the name of this certain person on a planet. And I'm assuming, is this answering your question, by the way?
Keep going. This is great. This is great. Please keep going.
And I'm assuming that they got him really mad, and now they're going to be at some sort of war. And within that, I'm sure, just like every other Star Trek episode does, it explores diversity and unveils deep questions under the veil of science fiction, and then they tie it all together as like, first of all, I love Star Trek because as we start to venture out become an interplanetary species,
Right.
which is what we are meant to be. Like, there's no choice. We either do or we die on this planet.
The point is, we want to meet other aliens and fall in love with them.
Right.
I mean,
that is such an, oh my gosh, we can go on a tangent about how we're going to procreate with other alien species, which I don't know if is ever possible. But as we go out into the cosmos, this is a real question that we have to think of, because, you know, a lot of people don't like the idea of colonization, like that term, to colonize, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, every culture has been colonized or been the colonizer, and we'd like to avoid that as much as humanly possible, which is, you know, humans can only do so much going forward. So if we were to come across an intelligent species, because, you know, there's a likelihood that we might have life here in our solar system. Whether or not it's intelligent is probably a low likelihood. We would have probably seen some kind of like signature or something that would let us know that there was intelligent life. But
right, and you're not allowed to tell us if there is, because you're from the future, and it would cause a major paradox.
Exactly,
and it would ruin
butterfly
the
effect, you know, exactly. So as we go into the far future, and if we were to come across an intelligent species, we have to approach this in a very, very sensitive way. Like, the great thing about science is you're not only answering questions, but you're finding new questions to ask. So as we go out into the cosmos and we come across an intelligent species, we don't want to get them mad, you know, because we don't know what this species is capable of.
Oh, I've seen Independence Day. I know all about this.
I love Independence Day.
It's great.
I love it. But the hope is to become, you know, as Star Trek is, to be able to coexist with whatever these intelligent species are. Hopefully, you know, we'll be able to communicate with them, you know, just in the beginning. And just cultures within on Earth, you know, something colloquial to us, which is completely innocent, could be absolutely offensive to another culture just here on Earth. So I can't even imagine what it would be like for aliens. So I'm assuming we got that wrong with the Wrath of Khan, and we didn't figure it out. So that's my final answer. That's a long-winded answer for we pissed someone off.
All of this is incredible, and thank you so much for everything you just said. That is all. I just want to be clear. That is all you know about the Wrath of Khan, is what you've guessed, and you don't know anything else.
Nope.
About it. I could not be more excited to see what you think about this movie.
Now I'm even more excited. The fact that you brought up that question means that I've probably derived the movie incorrectly, which makes me more excited to watch it, to see how I failed, and then to see why
no,
I
Amber,
don't understand what Wrath.
Let's be clear. You do not fail. You never fail. You have found an alternative way of interpreting. I can't even say words correctly because I'm so blown away by everything you've just said about what you think is going to happen with interplanetary species and all sorts of wonderful things. So
it's my favorite subject. Search
the
for
point
life.
is, you're not failing ever. And yes, I think you're going to be in for a treat with this film, which we will discuss when we return. But also, I want to point out that this is also, we decided to do this movie to celebrate the 40th anniversary. And I think maybe the week after we decided to do this, Kirstie Alley died. And this was her first movie ever. I think she'd been in Cheers at this point, but this was definitely her first film. So yeah, it's kind of nice that we get to honor her memory by doing this as well.
I love that.
Yeah. We're going to watch The Wrath of Khan. We'll be back. And Amber, like I said, I'm very excited to see what you think of it.
I'm stoked.
Now available to own on video cassette.
And we're back. Amber, how do you feel about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan? Tell me everything.
it's amazing. I mean, okay. Let me start from the beginning. First of all,
please.
I said that I knew Star Trek, and then I watched this and I was like, wow. I knew that I wasn't like Trekkie level, but now I'm like really not. I can't even claim even the S in the Star Trek. So
But you know what? You've taken your first step into a larger world. And yes, I am using a Star Wars quote to express the importance of this journey you've embarked on. So that's great. So don't feel bad. I mean, everyone has to start somewhere, and there are a few better places to start than this movie.
Yeah, I feel like I've watched too little, too scattered, too many episodes of Star Trek, and now that I watched the movie, I was like, okay, now I really have to watch it from the beginning all the way through.
Yes.
So like, because there's so many, I know that there's Easter eggs that I'm missing. I know that there's little things that I'm like, well, why did he do that? So
I was going to ask, did you end up watching Space Seed before, or did you just
go
into
I didn't have time, but now I'm like, okay.
But it still
works.
I
have to watch it. Yeah,
it still works.
It still
you can
works.
Understand it.
Yeah, so just as a alone film, it's great. But I know, like, just from the series that you would be able to appreciate it so much more if you really, really understood, like, the characters.
Right.
So I'm going to have to go back, do it all over again, watch it from the beginning, and then I'll watch. Because this aired, like, something like 10 years after the original.
Yeah, this was this was 1982. And the show ended, I think, in 1968. So I want to say about 15 years or so. If I'm doing the math correctly, and I probably am not doing the math correctly, but I think we're at about that 14, 15 years. So,
wow. And it's supposed to be something like 2 years later or something?
No, it actually takes place the same amount of time later.
Oh, so, right. Yeah, I remember Khan saying that it was like 15 years ago or something.
Yeah, and they really, and this was something they had to convince Shatner to go this route, because he was very concerned about portraying Kirk as like an older, a little more morose and depressed individual, and they had to basically convince him that it was for the best. He wanted to still play younger. He wanted to be like, no, I'm still the swashbuckling young man that I was when we were filming this show in 1966. And they were like, probably not. Let's just go this route. But I'm so glad they did, because so much of what I think makes this film so moving is Kirk's story of feeling that sense of weight and burden from his age, from the path his career has taken.
And it seems like it's completely different than movies in that time were taking, in the sense that, they were really highlighting this real part of a man's life too. Everybody's going to go through a midlife crisis, probably, maybe not everybody, but to be able to highlight it in like the male eyes, and for an audience, especially the Trekkies that grew up watching him as this super young, strapping young man, like just like coming in, and then to see him age is just like, I think that's like a whole another level of storytelling, probably for that time too.
Yeah, it's true, because you're thinking about, like, you had, as far as Star Wars goes, you have Luke Skywalker, who's very young, Han Solo, very young, very handsome, very like,
and
very
then Indiana
much
Jones,
like all these heroes coming out at that time, and then to have a character like in Star Trek with Kirk, for them to lean into it even, and to acknowledge it, and even with the actor protesting and being like, no, I don't want to do that. You're right. It feels like a pretty bold move to go that route, but it's, again, I think that's what has made the best of Star Trek most effective. This is always what makes Star Trek work, is the exploration of very human ideas behind, like, there's spectacle and there's fun and there are lasers and spaceships and stuff, but I really think that's what people who are maybe more dismissive of the franchise miss about what makes Star Trek so unique, is this willingness to address these kinds of things. And I think the original series certainly did do that, there are great episodes of the original series, but Wrath of Khan was a breakthrough for the franchise in many ways, but not the least of which was really emphasizing that. The original series had some ideas. It used the format of science fiction as a means to kind of not be preachy, but to like address life lessons and things that were like happening at the time, and kind of commenting on social issues without, they got away with it because they were under the guise of science fiction. But I think The Wrath of Khan was the first time it really came to the forefront in a very, very profound way. People may disagree with me about that, but I really think this is another level of storytelling for the franchise.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, admittedly, I haven't watched enough Star Trek to be able to like compare it, but just knowing like just the film itself and the time that it was in, you can tell that it was another level of storytelling just from the film itself. And so I like I said, I have to re-educate myself so the Trekkies don't attack me on the streets.
No,
I'm a little
You're gonna
afraid.
be fine. They're gonna be so excited that someone so cool is joining the ongoing mission to seek out new life and new. You're actually on the mission. You're seeking out new life and new civilizations all the time. As a time traveler, this is what you do on a regular basis. So they're just going to be really happy that you've embraced this. But I want to start from the beginning of the movie. So the opening scene, we get Kirstie Alley right off the bat. How lovely to see her. And she was a major Star Trek fan, and she was very, very excited to get this role. She apparently in her audition did an impression of Leonard Nimoy.
Stop.
To get the role. Yeah. And I wish there was an audition tape somewhere.
I was gonna say, what did she imitate? I want to know what she impersonated.
You and me both. So I don't know if anyone out there in on the internet has any way to get this footage, this audition footage. I would love to see it, and I think
yes, please enlighten us.
A really wonderful way to honor her memory. But it's so great that the movie, there was all this controversy surrounding the movie, and we are going to get into Spock's death because you not knowing anything about the movie, did you know Spock died at the end of the movie? So okay, we will get into that. I couldn't in the first part. I think the amount of glee that is coming through on my part is because I'm realizing that no one had spoiled this, or you hadn't gotten this movie spoiled for you.
No.
Because everybody knows, it's like, oh, Spock dies in The Wrath of Khan. And even when they were filming it, there was a lot of controversy because Leonard Nimoy had he'd grown exhausted of the franchise. He was tired of being Spock. He didn't want to be in it anymore. And the way they brought him back, the way they convinced him to come back, is they were like, how about we write you, how would you feel about acting out a great death scene? And he was like, oh, all right. Okay, kill me off. This will be the last Star Trek movie. That sounds great. But fans caught wind of Spock getting killed, and they were sending the writers and the producers death threats, like basically, if you kill Spock, we will kill you, and stuff along those lines. And it got that bad. So the opening scene, in a way, was an attempt to basically pull a fast one on the fans and be like, Spock died, but he didn't really die. So you're sitting in the theater watching, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, this must be what they were talking about. Spock died, but he didn't really die. It was all just a simulation. But how did you feel about that opening scene?
Yeah, I was really confused. I was like, okay, first of all, can I just talk about Captain Kirk's reveal in the beginning? I was like, okay, the pauses that they took at the beginning of the film was 1000% so the audience could cheer.
Yes.
Because they made it really great reveals for everybody. So when they just killed everybody off, I was like, I am so confused. And then his voice appears, or that's all you hear is the voice. Then he's just like lights on, and it's like this awesome reveal. And so
silhouetted the backlit shot of him just appearing behind the screen.
It was so epic. It was so epic. I was like, okay. If I was in the movie theater in the 80s, I also would have cheered. So they nailed it. So I was confused, but I was redeemed. So
I love that because like now it's so hard because I know it's a simulation, but I remember I do have memories of watching it as a teenager thinking it was kind of funny that like everyone died. Like I was just like, what is happening? Like there are explosions going off and Spock has like his explosion goes off and he stands and he's like, oh, my back, and then he falls over and I'm like, oh, I guess that killed him. I just remember thinking it was kind of funny, and then it's like, oh well, it's a simulation, they're all pretending. But I love that it got you.
They committed.
Yeah, they committed to the bit and it worked. So I love that as an opening. I love it as a cop out, like, or not a cop out, but basically just like tricking the audience, fooling the audience, and opening with such an absurdly bold idea of like, what if the first scene of the movie we just kill everybody. And then you reveal, oh, it's the Kobayashi Maru test. And then I love the way they kind of make that a running theme throughout the movie.
Yes.
Kirk has been, what's the story of how Kirk beat this unbeatable test? And you find out later on that he never actually beat it. He changed the rules. He cheated and he reprogrammed it so he could win. Yeah. And then he has to face the no-win scenario in real life. And I just love that this fun opening scene that's a little goofy, but a really creative way to open the film becomes thematically important throughout the rest of the picture. It becomes a major theme and a major development of Kirk's character.
Yeah, they did such a good job of really highlighting the theme of death, life and death, from down to the Genesis device. All of it, just like that simulation, Kirk going through a midlife crisis, all of it, like even down to the eyeglasses, like as a prop, that was really great too. It was just like they did such a good job.
Yeah, agreed. And I love McCoy, like just their conversation early on, discussing it, the familiarity between the two of them, the friendship and the humor, and the Romulan why Bones, this is illegal. And just that conversation of just him kind of like calling him out and being like, you're hiding from who you really are, and you need to get your command back, and And the eyeglasses is great. I love it always makes me laugh when during the first confrontation with Khan, when he is looking at the console, the computer console, and he's like, damn it, and he has to put the eyeglasses on and show how old he is to everybody. But
it's so funny though, like there's little things like that in sci-fi that make me giggle, because it's like, we probably won't have eyeglasses in the future, like it's very likely that they're not gonna, maybe, I don't know,
well, they won't. They have they make a comment about it where McCoy is like, usually for patients who are losing eyesight, I prescribe Retinex 6, and he's like, oh, I'm allergic to that. So it's like, this old antique, the eyeglasses.
I must have missed that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's
they
a
treat
great
it
workaround.
they treat it as an antique, because you're absolutely right. It's like, okay, but Geordi has a super future visor, which I know that's like however many years later, 80 years or whatever, the next generation. But yes, it's a very good point. But no, they reference it. It's an antique pair of eyeglasses.
Oh, I guess I must have just completely missed that, but that's brilliant that they did that workaround.
Yes, it's totally fine. So, how did you feel about Khan himself, Ricardo Montalban? Was he worthy of being the film's title?
Oh yeah, I mean, his performance was absolutely amazing. I think one of his was probably the strongest performance amongst everybody's. And two, I mean, I was staring at that man's chest because I was like, is that real? I could not figure it out. I was
it was a topic of much debate amongst Star Trek fans, amongst film fans. Is Ricardo Montalban's chest real? And Nicholas Meyer, the director of this film, has confirmed that yes, That is his real chest.
Did he put makeup? Like it was just like I was fascinated. That was the first thing I was like, wow.
It's hard not to like it's amazing, frankly, that you're able to discuss the film so coherently, because many people, I think, are so fixated on the chest that it completely outshines and outweighs everything else in the film. And you kind of have to take a moment to be like, wait, I don't think I've absorbed any of this. The chest is powerful.
I mean, for him being a genetically modified human, I feel like they were like, let's see your chest. Okay, that looks like a genetically modified human's chest. Yes. You get the role.
Exactly. But I think they realized they were like, we're going to have to make him genetically altered because there's no way to explain how amazing his chest is. So maybe that came in after the fact.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought that he was perfect. He was an insanely good villain. And yeah, his performance really, I think, outshone like pretty much everybody else's.
Well, he gets the opportunity to be like, he's scenery chewing, but it's not like over the top.
Yeah,
like he is relishing every moment he's on screen, and the way you want all the best villains to do. Like, you know, and the best Bond movies, the villain is usually a highlight of the film, and it's the same thing. Especially in a movie that's a little, you know, it's a little more fantastical and you can get away with that.
Yeah.
It's always a lot of fun, but you have to strike the right balance, because if you go too far, it becomes hokey. It becomes almost a parody of itself. And Ricardo Montalban walks that line so well. He's so imposing, and he's such a threat, and he's so powerful, but I kind of get this like little sense of glee, and I know part of it is the chest. I am 100% admitting that my man crush on Ricardo Montalban is a result of the chest, but like it is also, it's a delight to watch him perform, even though the character is doing, you know, horrible things. It's one of my favorite performances in any film. I agree with you. I think it's a highlight of the movie.
Yeah, and I mean his lines too. I had to go back and look up, because I know that Star Trek pulls a lot of quotes from like Shakespeare and stuff like that. So I had to go back at the end and pull his quote, because I was like, okay, this is clearly like some sort of defining character thing that I'm missing. Mm-hmm. So I looked it up and I saw that it was a Moby Dick reference. And then I remembered that they showed like when they were on, what is it, SETI Alpha 5? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
The books. And I remember seeing Moby Dick and I was like, oh, wow, this is like a whole reference.
They did a great job. And I never noticed that, actually. I'm really surprised you caught that. I haven't noticed that Moby Dick was amongst the books on the shelf. That's so cool. That's something where on paper it could be like, oh, it's a little pretentious. And Star Trek sometimes goes there. And for some reason, it always works with Star Trek. But, you know, from Hell's Heart, I stab at thee. He delivers it as if it's an Oscar-winning moment. You know, it's like he's not winking at the camera. He's not like, this is a little ridiculous, isn't it? He sells it. And there's a part of me that's like, how I think in the years since the film's release, with critics and film fans kind of like easing up a bit and toning down the snobbishness, this is a performance that can be recognized as one of the greats. Like, it's okay to put him on the same level as whatever other great performance you want to say, because I really think it's fantastic. And I love, you know, Star Trek is famous for it, but I love the Moby Dick quotes, the Charles Dickens, like all this stuff. It's all used for the story. Like it all comes back. It's not just showing off like, oh, we're very literary, we're very intellectual. It all comes back to serve the story. When Kirk quotes the end of A Tale of Two Cities at the end of the movie, like the final scene of everyone kind of looking out at the planet,
it
means
that.
something. Yeah, when he's it's a far better resting place than I've ever been, whatever the quote is.
Oh wow, I'm gonna have to go back and look at that one too.
It's a really lovely moment. Referencing there, like, is that a Carol says, is that a poem? And he said, no, it's just something Spock was trying to tell me on my birthday. And that was the gift that Spock had given him. Star Trek has always been really, really good at that. And I think, unfortunately, because of its more literary qualities, it's also been pegged as like, oh, it's a little slow and boring. And I think, if I were to criticize Wrath of Khan, I think there are some moments in the beginning where the pacing is a little slower. Maybe it's just because we're so programmed to be used to fast pace. And to be fair, I just rewatched the 2009 Star Trek, which is like, if original Star Trek is like maybe classical jazz, Star Trek 09 is rock and roll. Like, so it's a very different feel. But I wanted to ask you, did you feel there was any pacing issues, or were you completely invested? Were you into it? Like, did the pacing work for you?
Yeah, I 1000% thought it was slow. I was watching it and I was like, oh man, I am real confused. And this is like, the pacing is taking a little bit long. I was like, I know something amazing is gonna happen, but yeah, they really drew out those scenes, and I think you're 1000% right in the sense that we are now programmed for big action scenes, things to happen very quickly, and it was just shot differently back then.
Yeah,
but I also think that they really took their time for a reason. I think that they wanted the audience to catch things. They wanted the audience to really take in the characters and everything like that. So I don't know, maybe the pacing could have been quickened. But yeah, it was a little bit difficult at first, because I was like, this is taking a while.
I'm with you. Yeah, I love the movie, and I'm with you. And what was the point where it kind of won you over? Like, where you were kind of like, oh, okay, I get it now. Like, I'm into it now.
I think, I mean, it definitely caught my eye when they put the bugs in the ears, those worm things. I was like, this is disgusting.
That is a major creep out moment. Yeah.
I was like, what the heck? This is giving me Mummy vibes.
Yeah, and it's very Star Trek has little elements of body horror like the original series, but nothing on that level. That was definitely a whole other level for Star Trek, to have like something crawling inside your ear and then eventually crawling out, and all that stuff is very grotesque in a way that is very thrilling but also disgusting.
Yeah. So I think that was the point that kind of like woke me up. But honestly, whenever they start talking about like terraforming and things like that, I'm like, oh, how are they going to terraform the planet? Wait,
so when they were talking about Genesis and bringing up the little video, which by the way, that was
so good.
Yeah, that was also the first, I believe it was the first time a completely computer generated sequence had been in a film. Was the Genesis effect, that video they watched of the planet being terraformed. Yeah,
I was actually pretty impressed, because I mean, I know computer graphics, in the 80s were not the greatest, but I was like, it looked like topography.
Yeah,
looking at it, and I was like, this is really well done. It looks like something like a LiDAR satellite would take now. So I was like, this is pretty good. But I really liked that I love when they incorporate, any kind of space technology. I'm like, ooh, how do they do it? I want to see how they do it. And they didn't go into detail, but I was like, wow.
Well, of course. Yeah. They're like, yeah, it creates a new planet. How? Molecules and stuff. Well, I was going to ask you, who did you side with in the Genesis conversation? Did you feel like McCoy was more on point, where it's like, what are we doing? We shouldn't have this kind of power. Were you more on Spock's side? Like, kind of like, oh, well, this is very interesting. How do you feel? Is the Genesis project, in theory, as somebody who loves this stuff, how do you feel about the idea as a concept?
Oh, okay. Well, this is a whole conversation, but I honestly thought McCoy and Spock's conversation, they did a really good job at making a good argument for both sides.
Yeah.
So listening to it, I was like, okay, yeah, that. I mean, I agree, because the thing is with terraforming, you have to be okay with potentially killing off another species for humans. And and there's people called planetary protection scientists, and it's not to be confused with planetary defenders. Planetary defenders are the people that, send DART to crash into an asteroid in order to, make sure that in the future an asteroid won't pummel Earth. Planetary protection scientists actually make sure, we're not bringing anything from Earth to, say, Mars or the moon to contaminate it.
Gotcha. Okay.
So terraforming, one, who freaking knows how we're going to do it? You have to build an entire atmosphere.
Saw the video. You saw the Genesis video. It's very clear.
Plug in the big pill looking
you
thing.
Press
and
the
that's
button
it. You
and
press the
it
button.
works.
And
Yeah,
then there's
up.
leaves. And then there's creatures. And it's all fun. So actually terraforming is something that I'm super interested in. And I mean, I can get into it, but a former NASA chief scientist, his name is Jim Green, he really thinks that we can, one, not only terraform Mars, but he's a big component what am I trying to say? Advocate for terraforming Venus as well. So there's ways that you can do it, but whatever it is, that you're going to be drastically changing the planet, and it's not going to happen overnight. Like, they barely plugged in that Genesis thing and they're like, oh, we have plants, and all of a sudden there's animals that, evolved out of nowhere. And it's just like, this is going to take, thousands of years for an atmosphere to be able to build and then to protect that atmosphere. Like for Mars, for example, once they get the atmosphere up, the reason Mars lost its atmosphere is the solar wind stripped it away. So you have to figure out, how are you going to protect Mars from solar wind? So put some kind of like deflector to be able to protect Mars. But yeah, so terraforming isn't as easy as Star Trek made it, but obviously it's,
but we can
they're
aspire
on time. Yeah.
We can aspire to the day and age. We can aspire, to the 23rd century. And I'm guessing, again, since you have come here from the future to be a part of my podcast, which again, I really appreciate. That means a lot to me.
Of course.
I understand that you can't tell me whether or not this has been solved, instantaneous terraforming, because you don't want to throw off the space-time continuum. You don't want me to ruin it. Exactly. We can't do that. So I get it, and I appreciate your concern.
Yes, you're welcome. I also thought it was interesting that they used the Genesis device, and it was that, it's to revive all of these dead microbes, right, on these dead planets. But if there's anything living, it's going to destroy it. I thought that was a really interesting concept to throw it in there, because it's true. If you terraform like a planet, you're going to destroy whatever life is there, because it's, evolved to be in those conditions.
Yeah.
So, and that's like we were talking about before, that was another really brilliant way that they brought in life and death. Even the name Genesis, I thought that was extraordinarily smart.
Yeah, and I do love the Spock says, in the wrong hands, and McCoy says, the wrong hands? Whose are the right hands for controlling this kind of thing?
Ooh, and that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's always bringing in the philosophical debate of like what is right, what is wrong, what is ethical when it comes to this kind of stuff.
And that's one of the biggest struggles with science, is because it can be militarized so easily. And that was, I thought that was a great conversation that they touched on, because even it's extraordinarily relevant today. What we're doing in low Earth orbit, what we're doing on the moon, and beyond, is it's starting to get militarized, and at this point it's becoming like, well, other people are militarizing space, we have to, in order to protect ourselves, and it's just this cycle. And so I love that they touched on that. I thought that was really cool.
And again, we talked about it a little bit, but Gene Roddenberry, he got a little high and mighty on his concept, but it's really nice to believe in this kind of future where we've put aside our differences and we're doing all of this for the greater good.
Right.
And Star Trek II it changes the franchise a bit, because and from this point on, it's interesting to see how the series change, or the franchise, the film franchise and the series changes. But Wrath of Khan really sets it on a new course of like, you know, it's much more action oriented. It's much more focused on like a particular antagonist, a little less on broader ideas. Like the first Star Trek film, the villain is basically a giant spaceship that is very pretty and has lots of lights and crazy psychedelic special effects shows inside it, but it's not a defined villain. So Star Trek 2, I think some people could argue the franchise kind of moved away, particularly the films, from bigger ideas and a little bit more focused on like bad guy versus good guy. But I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think the important thing is they're still discussing the important ideas underneath all of this that's still coming through. But for me personally, where the movie starts to get real exciting is Khan's first attack on the Enterprise, when he catches them off guard, and then the way Kirk plays him to get the better of Khan with the prefix codes, where they figure out a way to outsmart Khan by lowering Khan's shields using their own computer consoles. It's such a fun and thoughtful, again, Star Trek is about like, how do we collaborate and come up with ideas to outsmart the challenges we're facing. And it's such a great, but boiled down, it's such a great moment. I really, really love that scene. It's one of my favorites in the movie. But I also really love them. They go to the space station and suddenly the movie becomes like a horror film with like all the dead bodies, and like for some reason there's a rat on the space station.
I watched and I was like, I was like, where is that?
Not even a space rat. It's just a rat.
I was like, am I missing something? I was like, I'm going to rewatch Star Trek from the beginning just to figure out why they have a rat on the spaceship.
Yes, you clearly missed something.
I missed something.
Rats in Star Trek are very, very important. Yes, I thought that was funny. As like, you know, it's in there as kind of a little jump scare moment, like, oh, a rat, but then you're like, wait, why is there a rat here? Like, does the Federation have problem? Well, it's not the Federation, it's an independent science project, but it's like, do they have problems cleaning their space stations? Like, is this a pet rat? Like, how did this get on board? Are they experimenting on the rat? Is that happening in the 23rd century still? We haven't gotten past that? Yeah.
Actually, I wonder, because this is where life has already started springing up, right? I'm mixing two and two together. Yeah, later on when they go in. I was like, maybe the rat got in because of the planetoid. But then
maybe they created the rat. Like maybe they were like, life from death. We brought this rat back to life.
Yeah.
Whatever. Well, we can come up. You know what? The Star Trek fans out there, I'm sure there is probably a whole wiki page devoted to this rat, and why it exists and justifying its existence on the space station. But I love, the reason Wrath of Khan works so well and feels so it revitalizes Star Trek, or it did revitalize Star Trek, is there's so much that's not quite, that wasn't really part of the show's landscape. Like the show never really delved into horror that much, a tiny bit, but not like this. Not like where you're finding dead bodies hanging from the railings, and people are like sealed up inside tiny boxes, and then the ear stuff. It's very, very good and very, very effective, and I really love the way it's shot. I just wanted to bring up that sequence. Did you enjoy that? Did it give you the heebie-jeebies?
It did. I get the heebie-jeebies very easily, which is why I love old sci-fis, because I'm like, that's not real. But
so this tricked you. It threw you off.
It threw me off. I was like, damn it. Exactly. It threw me off. I closed my eyes. It's fine. I'm okay.
That's good. You're okay. We made it through. They beamed down to the planet, and then we meet. We don't meet them. We've already met them. But Kirk is reunited with his old flame. How did you feel about Carol Marcus and Kirk's son David, and that revelation that Kirk has a son that he hasn't been with? He stayed away from the family because Carol asked him to. How did you feel about all that?
Was that them? Because this was made after Star Wars, right?
Yeah, it was after the first Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back.
So is this them trying to be like, oh, Luke's your father? Well, Kirk has a son. Like,
maybe
was that their way of like doing that? I was like,
well, I don't think it was that. I think the way I take it is this is a movie about the past coming back to haunt you, and amongst the other things we've discussed, like the idea of facing death and mortality and things like that. Kirk he marooned Khan and Khan's posse on this planet and never went back. He essentially abandoned them. And he did intentionally abandon his son, but at the urging of Carol, Carol Marcus, who insisted, she tells him, you had your world, I had mine, and I wanted him in my world. And so Kirk, he acknowledges, I did what you wanted, I stayed away. So, it's dealing with the theme again of Kirk's growing older. Now he's a father, and that responsibility, but also like this past relationship that he had is coming back into the forefront, and this son that he never knew is coming back into his life, just like this enemy he abandoned and left behind and all that stuff. So that's how I kind of took it. It's another layer of Kirk's journey as a character who is facing the past, reopening old wounds, as he makes the joke to McCoy. This movie is very well written. I love the one-liners in it. But
it's so good. I wrote down a bunch because I'm like, I need to just say these in real life.
Yeah,
like,
all the time.
They're so good.
McCoy, as a doctor or as a medical professional, you should know the dangers of reopening old wounds. And,
right.
Which is also after the great elevator sequence when Kirstie Alley, what's her name? Why I'm forgetting her name.
Saavik.
Yeah. They're talking and she's like, "May I ask what you did with the Kobayashi Maru?" And he goes, "You may ask." And that has that little cocky moment of like,
and then he just like leaves.
And then and no response whatsoever. But I digress. That's what I took it all as, is just the past coming back to haunt you, just a reinforcement of that idea. And it's a very, David throughout the film is just very antagonistic towards Kirk, but there's the really beautiful kind of culminating moment with the two of them in Kirk's cabin, just kind of that moment where he kind of brings Kirk back from the abyss following Spock's death and encourages him and tells him he's proud to be his son. It's a very moving, emotional moment.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And they also did an impeccable job of casting him.
Yeah.
He looks so much like William Shatner. And is her name Bibi?
Bibi Besh, I think is her name.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out. I was like, wow, he really looks like Captain Kirk and Dr. Marcus. Like, they did a really good job. But what they did very well that I noticed in this film is making callbacks and tying up loose ends. Like, they did a amazing job at just like, making those connections. And they did that with, as you said, like Kirk and David. So
and they mentioned something like, if we do this by the book, like if at like Lieutenant Saavik, if we did this by the book, and the hours would feel like days. And then they reveal later on that despite Kirk's despair and screaming Khan and really,
oh my gosh, can we talk about that?
Yeah, well, first let's talk about that. So Khan, you're familiar with the screaming Khan, aren't you?
That was the first time that I had ever experienced it. Am I supposed to be familiar with this?
This is ingrained in pop culture where people will just Khan, like it's such a it's referenced constantly and people are always talking about it. So that is amazing that this is the first time you
I feel like I know nothing. Like I know I am very like the level of ignorance that I have towards pop culture is like real high. But
it's great though. You got to give yourself some credit because you get to experience these things fresh. Like, you didn't know that Khan is kind of a running gag amongst Khan, him screaming is so famous now and has been parodied so much. But you didn't know about Spock dying, so you get to come in with like this fresh like take, like a very, very like you went in not knowing anything. So you get to it's really great to talk to you about it because you get to, as somebody who, I'm a super nerd and I'm very ingrained in pop culture, and many of my friends are, there aren't many people I know who aren't familiar with any aspect of this movie. So it's very, very cool to get a really, really fresh perspective to remind me like how good this movie is for a new audience, like a person who hasn't seen it.
Yeah, I feel like I know the world now. Like I know everything. Just like I'm gonna be able to catch up on every single pop culture reference because apparently they're all in this film. So
Yes. Now, okay, let's talk about Spock's death. So this is, you did not know about it.
no, I had no idea.
How did that hit you?
I basically was just like, may I cuss on this? What the That's literally what I said when I saw. I was like, is he dying? I was like, oh no. I was like, Spock can't die. I was like, he's in the other films. I'm so confused. And then he died, and I was like, oh, okay.
You're like, what do I do?
What do I do? I didn't know what to do. I was just like, okay, that's how that. It was a glorious death scene, though. Good for Leonard Nimoy for being able to really channel that. It was really well done. I thought that it was a beautiful death scene, but I was also like, how dare they?
So you were one of the fans who you were going to write them some death threats, some very sternly worded letters.
Yeah, I'm still going to. I don't know who I'm going to send it to, but I'm gonna
send it. Nicholas Meyer. Brandon Braga. Yeah, Nicholas Meyer. Send it to him. He's still alive. He's out there.
Okay, I'm gonna find you, Nicholas.
Give him a piece of your mind. But I love that scene so much. It's such it's unfortunate, I think, and this is something I want to ask you. The fact that Spock's death isn't final, I think, kind of doesn't rob the moment of its power. But yeah. I kind of side Nicholas Meyer. The way the film originally ended was you had the death of Spock, and they send him off in the torpedo, and they don't really have the hopefulness, like with them kind of like, oh, he's not really gone, and then kind of teasing like, oh, his grave is on the planet, maybe he's gonna come back. They didn't have that originally, and test audiences were really upset. Like they were just like, oh, it was so depressing, and they felt like they'd ruined everything. And Nicholas Meyer was like, well, that's the film. That's the way it should be. He's dead, and that's it. And I kind of side with Nicholas Meyer. Not that I want Spock to die. I talk about this a little bit.
You're gonna get angry letters.
I know. Well, look, me and my two good friends, Brad Gullickson and Aaron Prescott, went through the entire Star Trek franchise and reviewed and ranked all the movies, and we talk about this a little bit on there, and I would encourage people to go listen. If you want to hear more Star Trek thoughts, go listen to that episode. It's great. But I said this there too, which is that I kind of side with Nicholas Meyer. I don't want Spock to not come back. I know Spock has to come back, and I'm glad he does, but there's a part of me that thinks Spock's death is not just a cheap gag in the movie. It's not it's not a shock thing. It's not oh, Spock died. It's used to reinforce Kirk's journey. It's a punctuation mark at the end of Kirk's journey, and it is fundamental to his character arc in this film. He's never faced the no-win scenario. He's never had to face death. And Khan, even though Khan is defeated, Khan does get the last laugh. He gets his revenge. And, again, Kirk finally has to face mortality, the no-win scenario, in one of the worst possible ways he can, with losing his beloved friend and crew member.
I do agree with you, because he also is used to having, like, he doesn't believe that there's no such thing as a no-win situation. So in that sense, there was a loss. Yeah. And, and for him to deal with it, I do agree. Maybe they could have brought him back like Mufasa in the Nebula and just talked to Captain Kirk like the Lion King. I would have been on board for Spock in a
You want Spock to have a space ghost, like he's basically like, in Star Wars, they're Force ghosts that come to instruct Luke along his Jedi training.
Right.
Dead characters come back. So you want Spock to be a forced ghost at the end of this movie.
Yeah,
like everyone's like, Spock's
Mufasa.
gone, and then Kirk turns around and Spock's like, or am I? And he winks at the camera, and that's how the movie ends.
Oh, which by the way, them flying through the nebula cloud, I was like, this is awesome. It's probably not at all accurate, but it's awesome. Like the wispy clouds. I was like, it's so wispy. I love it.
It's really cool. It's a really fun, Nicholas Meyer had always wanted to do a submarine movie, and he just hadn't had a chance. And when he got the opportunity to do Star Trek, he kind of saw the spaceships fighting as submarine warfare.
Ooh,
and you
that.
really see it in that scene. He treats it as such. They're flying on top of each other, underneath each other. And I love just the concept of like, they don't have their scanners, they don't have their radar, they don't have their targeting systems. They're just like going in blind, and they're both on even ground. They have to face off in this situation. I just love that as a concept, and it makes it really exciting as the climactic moment of the movie to have them kind of like sneaking up on each other. I thought it was really effective. Did you feel the same way? Did you enjoy that sequence?
Despite I feel like I didn't
kind of weird
enjoy
clouds?
it. I feel like I didn't enjoy it enough. I have to go back and watch it. I was distracted by the wisps.
By the chest.
By the chest and the wispies. I'm gonna have to go back and replay that whole situation.
What would you say is one of your favorite moments from this film? What would you call like the top scene that you're gonna hold on to and remember? And this is gonna transition into our next conversation, which is like what things didn't work about the movie. But first, I want to hear about your favorite moment.
I mean, I think the saddest but my favorite was the Spock scene, the Spock dying scene. I also thought it was really interesting. I love whenever there's a Vulcan pinch. Like, it just makes me giggle. And when he just Vulcan pinched McCoy, and then he left that seed of like, remember, I was like, okay, that's a really good like way to be able to anticipate the next movie.
Right.
I don't think I have a favorite scene, to be honest.
And it's hard to, having seen it once, it's hard to be like, you're kind of trying to absorb the whole thing too.
Yeah, I'm going to have to rewatch it, and then I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah. So as far as the film's weaknesses go, we talked a little bit about the slower pacing. It's a little off at the beginning. It kind of finds its way maybe around the halfway point. I think for me, if there's anything I knock this movie for, it's that, it has a smaller budget than the previous film, because the previous film, its budget just ballooned to something like $40 million because of the special effects work. And again, that's in 1970s dollars. So who knows what that is now. And the film did not perform well box office wise. I think it made a tiny profit, but one of the big things about Star Trek 2, one of the mandates from Paramount was it's like, we've got to make it for cheaper. They got their entire television division to work on the film. So the idea was, we're going to make it for much, much cheaper and hopefully get a much higher profit as a result.
Right.
And frankly, Wrath of Khan looks a little cheap. Like, I think some of the effects don't hold up as well. Some of the stuff is a little clunky, a little hammy. Like, it doesn't quite hold up as well. Like, for instance, Blade Runner was released this same year, and Blade Runner looks insane. It's one of to this day, it's one of the best looking films ever, if not the best looking. But
I have never seen Blade Runner.
Oh my God, Amber!
I told you. I'm inept.
No. This is good. I've done Blade Runner on the show, but I cheated. Blade Runner was a Kobayashi Maru episode for me, because my buddy John Mills and I, there are multiple cuts of Blade Runner. It's like, there was the theatrical cut, and then the director's cut, and then the final cut, and then the work. There's lots of versions of the movie. So we cheated a bit, and I watched the theatrical cut for the first time because I'd never seen that version. And my buddy watched the final cut for the first time because he'd never seen that version. But we'd both seen Blade Runner. So maybe there's an opportunity there for us to do that. Just putting that out there. Okay. But this is all to say that I think the cheapness of Wrath of Khan does make it hard to wholeheartedly recommend to people who are maybe Star Trek skeptics or they're not into the franchise. Like I said in the first part, and I still stand by this, I think Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan is probably the best Star Trek film. Right. But I don't know if somebody is not already a fan of Star Trek, that it would be the one that I direct them to because of that kind of stuff. But what do you think? Did you notice these? You kind of mentioned it a little bit, but did you notice these shortcomings? And what other things about the movie didn't necessarily work for you?
I think it's those two are the biggest things. I do think because, especially nowadays, because it's a little bit slower and the philosophical like themes, you really have to pay attention and you really have to let it like soak in for a little bit to be able to appreciate the film. Because the first go around, you might not be able to catch a lot of the great nuances that they're trying to hit on. But I personally love when sci-fis look kind of cheap. It makes me happy. I don't know why. Like when Khan picked up that giant metal thing, I was like, that is foam. I was like, you can tell that is
exactly
foam. And I love
exactly what I was thinking about. Yeah, that's one of the moments where I'm like, and I mean, bless his heart, Ricardo Montalban acts the out of that, like, and lifting it, but it looks fake. And the movie, it was shot quickly. I think Nicholas Meyer, it's a great movie considering or it looks great considering the lack of resources, but there are a lot of shots where it's like he lets things play out in masters where I'm kind of like, oh, you could use a close up here or things like that. It looks a little cheaper. And I think a lot of that was because it was relatively low budget, and they had, I think, a much shorter production schedule. They really rushed it, and I think it's really by the grace of a great script from a great filmmaker and a great cast and crew that the film transcends its limitations to become something as special as it is. And honestly, like, anything that throws me off about like the low budget elements, and they said that Khan's crew members were actually like Chippendales dancers, which is like, well, they look like Chippendales dancers.
Are you serious? Is that like a real fact?
That is the truth, apparently, according to, I think, IMDb's trivia, which we always take as the gospel truth on this podcast. Yes. And
that's glorious.
They're great, but they, the feathered hair and like just the look is very dated, and it just kind of feeds into the cheapness, quote unquote, of the film. But I think the strength of the story and the ending, and really, and we talked about Ricardo Montalban, I really want to give some major props to William Shatner, because just like, the screaming of Khan, which he is responsible for, I think he is very easy to parody, and you've seen a lot of these parodies, the way he talks and performs and the way people make fun of him. I think his performance in this, for me, he and Khan are by far the best parts, and they need to be the best parts. Like, they have to be the best performances. But I think Shatner's vulnerability to allow Kirk to be older and sad and not at the top of his game.
Right.
I really love that. I really like some of the moments. Like, it's easy to parody Shatner's performance elsewhere, but I think in this film he really, really delivers something special. I just think of not Khan, the death scene with Spock, and at the way he plays it, just so understated. Like when Spock finally dies and he just goes no, he just says no, and it's not like a no, like it's not overblown. It's just a completely defeated, despairing expression. And Nicholas Meyer talked a little bit about directing Shatner, how in some cases Shatner would go over the top, and Meyer would do take after take after take until he'd finally worn Shatner out enough to get understated moments.
That's hilarious.
But I really, really love his performance in this film, and I get choked up. I mean, the ending is very emotional, but his, of all the souls I've encountered, his was the most human, you know, is choking on that line is really, really powerful.
Yeah, I love that line. That I you just reminded me that is my favorite scene, is that death scene, actually.
Yeah.
I thought that
it's
was
a standout,
very beautiful.
Yeah, it's a standout. That's a moment that I think ranks very highly for many Star Trek fans. There's a lot of great stuff to pull from, but I think if we're ranking top moments in the films, I think that easily ranks number one. It's a beautiful moment. There's so much weight to it because these guys, people grew up watching and loving this show, so that you have your own baggage that you're bringing to that scene, and you have these two characters who have been friends for so long. They have this infallible friendship, and to see them kind of saying goodbye to each other, it's a very powerful scene. And again, you know, this movie could have just been a big effects movie that ends with like everyone's okay, but you know, the people involved, even though, you know, Leonard Nimoy might have come in with a contractually obligated death scene, but it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel cynical or tossed off. It feels earned, and it is relevant to the story being told. And I think that's what makes this film so powerful, and what makes it work despite some of the more dated elements, despite some of the effects work. I think it ends up really, like, I just end up walking away feeling very, very impressed and wanting to watch it again.
Yeah, and I think that's what solidifies this as a great film too, is the fact that, you know, they did transcend all of the foam to come up on top.
All the foam, and what did you call it? The squigglies, the whatever.
The wispies.
Wispies.
The foam and the wispies, to just still make like a really, at its core, great film. And if there's someone that wants to watch it, if they can get over the slow pacing at first, it really does like hit all of the themes that Star Trek is iconic for.
Yeah, and it saved the franchise. Like, the movie, again, Spock was supposed to be like the last, the final farewell, and then it ended up being, it did really well. It was critically well received. It was very well received by fans, and Leonard Nimoy suddenly was like, hey, maybe I don't want to stop making these movies. Like, this actually, I liked making this one. And the next one, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, is directed by Leonard Nimoy. I think that's how they sweetened the deal for him. They were like, well, how would you like to direct this film? So he directs Star Trek 3, which is not my favorite Star Trek film. And you know, I don't want to spoil it. I think it'll be a lot of fun to watch, but I think it certainly has its moments. But Star Trek 4, on the other hand, is spectacular. It's a comedy, and it works really. It's genuinely, sincerely funny, and one of the best Star Trek movies ever. And it's also directed by Leonard Nimoy. And then William Shatner was like, oh, hang on, I want to direct one. And he directs Star Trek 5, which is, I think, unquestionably the worst of the original crew's Star Trek films. And Nicholas Meyer comes back for one more go round for Star Trek 6. He directs that one, and that one's a lot of fun too. So there's a lot of good stuff to watch. You're so behind, but it's okay. That means there's so much more to enjoy. And frankly, I'll make you, and I'd be interested too to see, maybe on social media, if anyone's listening to this, you can tweet at me at YayShawnDorman. What are the quintessential original series episodes Amber should watch? Because you can watch it from the beginning. I'd encourage that if you have the time, but we live in a world where there's no shortage of stuff to do, things to watch, and you're busy. You got to go back to the future and tell everybody about the things you've learned here. So I know your time is short, so maybe we'll get some recommended episodes. I'll send you a few, maybe highlights. But for sure, I would recommend The Next Generation, watching it from beginning to end, even though the first 2 seasons are really, really rough. It's worth it to get to season 3, and from that point on, the show is great. And watch The Measure of a Man.
Yes.
It's such a fantastic episode. And go back and watch Space Seed as well, so you can see where all the fun con stuff began.
Gosh, I'm so embarrassed that I didn't like know who he was. I was like, Khan is this? I don't know who he is. And then
You're
I
like, it's a
after
planet.
I was like,
it's a planet, I get, or a species.
Cringe. That's okay if there's something that I'm really actually never mind. I was gonna say what I'm really good at is being ignorant, but apparently I was not. I was not very good at being like, I don't know. Well, I guess I didn't know who Khan was. Anyway,
now you know.
Now I know. I hope the Trekkies will forgive me. I'm trying to grow up to be one of you one day.
I'll forgive you on their behalf.
Thank you.
I think more importantly, you have shown a willingness and an openness to take a deep dive into this journey. You've watched the quintessential Star Trek film, and that's going a long way, Amber, and you have to give yourself a round of applause for that. Pat yourself on the back. You've done it. You're doing it. It's happening, and you have so much more to look forward to. So it's you're on your way.
Thank you for making me feel secure on my journey, Shawn.
I'm glad. Of course, that's what I'm here for, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad this kind of. I think what makes this film so wonderful is that it really does spark that kind of like, oh, Star Trek is really great, isn't it? And it makes you want to watch more and do more. So I'm glad this is kind of worked out, and that it has opened the doors for you to want to do more.
Yeah, it definitely has.
Anything else to say about Star Trek 2? Are we good to go?
I think I am have regurgitated all of the things for now. So
you said you had a couple quotes. Do you have any quotes you want to share that you love?
Oh, I'll share one where I'm like, I love this one, and it's so simple. It's when it's at the end of like Captain Kirk and Spock's conversation where he's like, I would not presume to debate you. And he goes, that's just wise. And I was like, I am going to use that in every argument forever. And yes, so that's
you know which one I love is Khan is they're trying to coax Khan after them into the cloud so they can be on even footing. And as Khan's ship slows, Kirk patches in and starts to tease him, and he goes, Khan, I'm laughing at the superior intellect. That's one of my favorite quotes in any movie. It's so good.
They're so good. The humor is on point.
I'm gonna cheat a little bit again, and I'm gonna take the same final rating system I used in that franchise episode where my franchise boys and I went through all the movies. I said for final ratings, with 5 being the highest and 1 being the lowest, how many superior intellects would you give Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan?
I have to give it a solid 5, and this is not because I'm afraid of Trekkies coming for me.
But that certainly helps.
It helps, but it's simply like because of our conversation before, the fact that it still told an incredible story despite their budget.
Yeah.
And it really did hit on a lot of heart that the franchise has, become known for. So I'm going to give it a solid 5.
You and me both. And I love there's a famous review, Janet Maslin from the New York Times. She was a film critic, a very well-known film critic at the time. The first sentence of her review was, well, that's more like it, which is, I always loved that, because the first one, it felt like it got off to like a clunky start. And the second film, everyone was like, hey, there we go. That's the Star Trek we know and love. So, and I would not discourage you from watching the first Star Trek. I think it's a
well, I have to. I need to watch this burning room of a film.
It's really not a burning room. It's just, if you thought this was poorly paced, just you wait. But it's interesting. It's got a great soundtrack, and it's got some cool ideas, but man, don't watch it late at night. You will be asleep. You will fall asleep.
Noted.
I'll just put that out there. But again, I have a soft spot in my heart for that film. But Amber, thank you so much for coming back to the show. It's always lovely to hang out with you. And it sounds like we've got plenty more science fiction adventures to go on. But I think, you introduced me to a film last time. I'm introducing you to a film this time. I think next time we'll open the floor to you again and let you introduced me to one.
I don't know if there is one that I haven't watched and you've watched. I unless you haven't watched all of the Disney films, because that's all I know.
I don't. There are some that I have not seen for sure. I didn't grow up in that. Like I was immediately into Star Trek and Star Wars and Superman, Back to the Future. That was my world. So when my parents tried to get me into like Disney animated, I was like, no, princesses and kissing and talking animals and singing. Where are the lightsabers? Like that was my reaction. So I missed a lot of Disney movies. So there's an opportunity there.
Give me talking animals, and if we're talking about Pixar, talking toys, any
Pixar,
animatic, yes,
I'm with, yes,
all of the things. But yes, thank you so much for having me. I love this experience because I learned so much. So
good. Yeah, I learned so much too. I learned about terraforming, about time travel, and about chests. Really, Ricardo Montalban's chest, and just how effective.
Glorious.
A tool it is, and it should have been used way more, I think. But anyway, if people want to find you out there on the internet, they want to see all the cool stuff you're doing, where can they find you on social media?
Well, I am my personal social media is Ambre _Rosario ROSARIO, where I do a ton of science communication. And that's probably the best place to see me just talk nonstop about all the space things, because that's all I really know about. So
well, no, you know plenty of things, but with emphasis on the best, because it really is the best, and all the stuff you share is so cool, and I love it. So thank you for that. Everyone, you can follow me on Twitter at @ShawnDoorman, the dumpster fire that is Twitter right now. But tweet at me and I'll respond. Say hello. You can also find me on Letterboxd. It's just ShawnDoorman05. You can see all my film ratings there. And that is that. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We will see you at the movies.